You're listening to a social justice podcast, an exploration of our world's social issues, brought to you by NES Design and Construction and hosted by Nicola Spurling on the traditional and unceded territories of the Kwikwetlem, Katzie, and Qayqayt peoples. Hello, this is a social justice podcast. I'm your host, Nicola Spurling, and today I'm joined by Amanda Carrasco for a conversation about restorative justice. To start things off, Amanda, thank you for joining, and can you introduce yourself a little bit more thoroughly?
Yeah, so I sort of do a lot of things. I am a business owner in Canada. I own Harmony Homestay, and that's been a source of income for me and my kids for 15 years, which, so entrepreneur and CEO, it has been a very interesting journey. I also am a partner in a nonprofit in California. It's called Sharp Circle Inc. And we basically run a mentoring program. Right now, we have contracts with the city of San Francisco and Monterey County to work in their juvenile system. So we're running programs in the juvenile facilities. And we've also been given a grant this year to work on reentry with, incorporating how to support the young people returning back into communities. So I have some academic degrees, which are neither here nor there, but there's a lot of schooling behind that's kind of gone into all of that. But what's even more important is really, about my personal experience and life journey through trauma and my healing journey, because I don't want to say healed, but it's always a journey. And the ways that that's intersected with my life and the work that I do. So.
Right. Well, speaking of that trauma and that healing journey, are you willing to share some of the story about what happened to you and your family that kind of created that trauma and took you on this path?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have written a memoir. It's going to be released mid-August. It's called Becoming the Brave One. And it's divided into two sections. And the first section is the journey through the harm. And it, sort of chronologically goes through the things that I've experienced. I am a sexual assault survivor. I am a family member after homicide survivor. And, there's, sprinklings of other things as, kind of typically happens in life, right? Like, you're pretty blessed if there's only been like one thing, there's often a mixture of things. So I am definitely that. But thank God for part two, which is the journey through the healing. And again, like that's been a long journey. There's same thing, like there's a lot of different things that have contributed to that journey. And I think that was kind of the important thing for me to let people know out there, like not only just what I've experienced, because there's a lot of people that will share similar experiences. And when we connect with others and build that community piece and know that we're not alone in our pain, we're not alone in our trauma, we may not have all shared the exact same journey, but we all can understand, pain, loss, shame, grief, all these types of things. So when we can connect on those and then build each other up and also like what I've learned from other people, reading other people's books, talking to other people, going to groups or conferences or whatever it is, and going, what worked for you? And some things will work for me and some things won't. So it was really my hope just to kind of share with people. These are some things that really helped me along the way, including some things that didn't, but I just want to share that in as maybe a benefit to other people. And just as I've learned from others, I'm like, hey, if there's anything you can learn or gather from this, then fantastic, right? So, yeah. So
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to pry too much into specifics, and we're talking about how this relates to people who have had different experiences as well. So when we talk about going through a traumatic experience, whether that is, around that homicide piece or sexual abuse piece, how did those experiences affect you, not just in the short term, but sort of in the aftermath in the years that followed, from like a mental or even physical perspective?
that is such a great question. Honestly, I appreciate that question. Because I do. I mean, obviously I've written a book, so that I am kind of laying some things out there. So you know, it's not like you can't go unaffected. You know what I mean? But I do talk about like how I did try to put certain things into boxes, and especially in particular my sexual assaults. And even to extent, it was my sister and twin nephews that were murdered by my brother-in-law. And I was living with them, so we were all a family. And I was supposed to be home that night. It wasn't a
Um,
rage like it was planned. So had I been home, I would not be here.
wow.
So, I mean, all of those things were pretty significant. And especially when you're young, And, there's a reason why I was living with my sister and didn't have, all of the supports that ideally a child should have growing up. And so, I mean, what do? You do the best you can, and so you box it and you pretend like you're okay and pretend like everything's fine, but you also don't know any different. And again, that's where, like, it's been helpful for me to connect with people who have also come from traumatic backgrounds for that piece that I don't feel alone or any of that kind of stuff. But it's also really helpful for me to connect with people who have, sort of made a lot of progress in their healing journey. So that way I can see what this looks like. What does healthy look like? Because when you don't know what healthy looks like, it doesn't feel comfortable,
Mhm.
like, because what is unhealthy, and that feels comfortable because it's familiar. So familiarity breeds comfortability. And so yeah, it's been helpful to connect with other people to kind of be like, oh, wait, you mean life isn't like this for everybody? It doesn't have to be like this? Like what? Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I mean, recognizing I didn't realize this that you were supposed to be in that house, and is there an element of survivor's guilt that you had to overcome as well?
Oh yeah. And I don't know that I would say I've overcome. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right, it's the
I
process
don't think,
still.
yeah, no, but so but I think there's progress,
Mhm.
like yeah, there's you get to a point where it's like these things are not influencing your decisions the way that they were and impacting you the way that they were. But there's 100% survivor's guilt, because if there was any way I could have traded with my sister, I would have in a heartbeat. And I've had extensive conversations, with my therapist about that and whatnot, right? Like,
Mhm.
so, and I get it. But yeah, I don't think that I can ever feel like okay that it was her and not me.
Right.
Um, so, and in fact, I'll say that that was something. This is going to jump ahead a little bit, so you may want to back me up in a second. But I sat in a restorative justice circle with my former brother-in-law, the man who killed my family, and it was one of the things that I said to him was, you know, pretty much every day I've wished that I was home, and not because I think I could have stopped you, because I know I couldn't have, but I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't carry the pain that I have to carry, like, that you left me with.
Right.
So, and that's something for me that, people and people don't understand restorative justice. Why would you wanna sit with him? Why would you want but there were things that I needed to say to him that helped me. I didn't go there to benefit him in any way. I went there because I needed something. And so being able to tell him, "This is the pain that you caused me. This is the damage you've done to my life," and that there have been days that I really wished I wasn't here because that seems better than what I'm dealing with. So thankfully I'm not in that place anymore, but I think like it's such a loss. Like losing a family member to murder is not like anything that you can experience, and I know anyone who's lost a family member to murder, like, knows, and they'd be shaking their heads, I'm sure, listening to this, because it's such a unique thing. Accidents are tragic and they are horrible. Diseases are unfortunate, like, that's terrible, but it's like this was literally someone's decision to purposefully take their life?
Right.
So, it's a whole different pain that I just think that I'll carry, but I've learned how to carry it differently, and it doesn't drag me down the way pardon me, the way that it used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, and like you said, we will get into that conversation around that healing circle and what that looked like in a little bit. But obviously, that's one of those steps that you had to take in order to continue on that healing journey. So, what are maybe some other steps that you had to take in terms of, I guess, getting past or surviving that kind of uh, trauma, that sort of really difficult emotional and mental experience that you were struggling with? Were there like some other points that were turning points for you where you went, okay, I really needed to do this thing in order to get to this next step in my healing journey?
Right, yeah. So, I mean, if I could sum that up in one word, I'm gonna say it's community.
Mm,
And I say that because and it seems oversimplified because it is, 'cause community can look like so many things. I've had a core group of people, friends that are basically my family who have really walked with me for a very long time now. And I have depended on them. They have kicked my ass when I needed it. They've loved me when I've needed it, helped pick me up, all those kinds of things. And I think that's really important. Even if you can only have one or two of those, that's life sustaining. I am super blessed to have more than one or two, and
Mhm.
each person kind of fits a different thing. Um, I am an advocate for therapy, but with a caveat. I've seen a lot of therapists, and some are helpful and some are not. Some are actually detrimental. So, I think it's very important to be informed about your therapy, to make sure it's the right fit for you, to make sure they have the right skills and training. Doctors specialize, right? You're not going to go to your GP for brain surgery. Why? Because he's terrible? No, that's not his specialty. So, learned as I went through, like, different therapists have different, specialties and different trainings. So, when you've had the extents of trauma that my life has experienced, working with someone that was, professionally trained, had certifications and skills, to do certain types of therapy was really helpful because some of my other therapists could get me to a certain point. But, like the last therapist that I saw, like we did EMDR therapy. I cannot tell you what the acronym stands for. It's like eye movement Desens I don't know. Yeah, I'm like, I can't tell you what it stands for, but,
Mhm.
EMDR is, you have to have special training in that, and it was interesting because when I sat with that therapist, she said, like, "Why are you here?" And not in a bad way, but, like, "You seem very fully functioning," and I said, "Well,
Mhm.
that's because I am," but I knew there was something else, I knew there was something deeper, something that I just hadn't touched, something that was there. So, and then working through that with her was what got me into some of those deep levels of survivor's guilt and feeling that I actually shouldn't be alive and, that I deserved to die. And so when you live with that belief and you're carrying that with you, that affects all of your decisions. This deep rooted belief that I couldn't have articulated before. I knew something was there,
Mhm.
but when you believe like you don't even deserve life, someone who's treating you poorly, you're like, "I'll take that because I don't even deserve to be here," or those kinds of things. I don't deserve good things because I don't even deserve to live.
Mhm.
So that's why it's good to like unpack those things because those negative experiences, like they're implanting on you, right? Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, like the body tracks, and it's giving you these messages and implanting things into your brain that sometimes we're just not even realizing are there until we take the time, sit down, sometimes with the help of a therapist to unpack these things and be like, what do I truly believe about myself? And then you can look at your decisions and be like, oh, now I see how that's impacting all the choices that I've made?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's that expression that, none of us know what other people are going through, right? You're walking down the street, you see all these people passing you. You don't know what's going on in anyone else's life. There are people that are really struggling, and you just don't see it because they're masking or you're just not seeing that side of them. Is that, as someone who is walking around and struggling, at least maybe more so back then than now, where you are in your journey? Is that kind of a lonely experience, to not have people realize that and have to actually speak it out loud in order for other people to understand what you're going through?
Well, I would say that for me, it goes back to my core group. Because for sure, like even now, like I mean, there are tough days, right? Like that's the reality of it. But yet, I'm a business owner. I'm a professional. I'm showing up in courts and different things with all my law stuff. And so, um, I mean, sometimes it doesn't matter what kind of a day I'm having. You know what I mean? Like I have to
Mhm.
show up and I have to be a certain way. And it was actually my therapist said, she goes, Amanda, you have this amazing ability to box stuff, which can be good and can be bad.
Mhm.
So, when I need to be in my professional box, like this is how I need to be, even though I'm kind of struggling inside. But I think the key with that, and also too, because not everybody's entitled to know how you're doing. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Like everybody that's saying, how are you? How's your day and calling you, like, um, they're not entitled to necessarily know that you're breaking down right now. It's okay. I hate fakeness, but in this kind of context, it's okay to be fake, and just be like, "Oh, I'm good. Thank you for asking."
Right.
I've got my core people that I'll either be texting and being like, "I'm not okay. I'm gonna have a breakdown." "When are you free?"
Mhm.
Like that, or just do the phone call and just be like, I just need you to sit with me right now." And, I have one really amazing girlfriend, and I'll be like, I'm shame spiraling, and she's like, okay, what do we need to do? So yeah, sometimes it's okay to not be okay and pretend you are. But if you're in that constant state all the time, that's a serious problem,
Right.
and that's not sustainable and you need help. But if you're like, okay, I need to set this right now and I'm just going to box it, but just for now, and I'm going to come back to it. You've got to come back to it. Cause that's for years. I just put everything under the stairs and was like, it's not there. I'm fine. Nope, not fine. Like they
Hmm.
just go away. We have to actually deal with them. They don't go away.
Right. So there's sort of a difference between compartmentalizing things and isolating yourself completely.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that taps into what you were saying is that isolation piece, and that's the lonely space.
Hmm.
When I've just got something in a box, I know that I'm gonna invite my friend over, "Can you help me unpack this?" And then I don't feel alone, even though I know underneath I'm not really doing well right now, I'm just trying to make it through, but I know I'm gonna get to a place, and I know I'm not alone in it, right? But, yes, if we're just or not compartmentalizing, but, isolating and just throwing everything to the back and being like, "It doesn't exist. I'm totally fine all the time," that can be a super lonely place and dangerous place, right? Like, mental health-wise, and again, those decisions then start to spiral.
Hmm. Absolutely. And what led you down that path to restorative justice as part of this healing process?
Yeah. So I kind of like heard about restorative justice, but didn't really know a ton. And I started doing a little bit of my own research. Um, and so Simon Fraser University, I don't know if they still do, I think they do, but they had a certificate program in restorative justice. And I thought that was really interesting. And so I took the program. And while I was in the program, I met a classmate who was actually working in like running programs in prisons in California. And it was during COVID. And so he said, why don't you Zoom in with us? Like we're doing our programs, but we're doing it by Zoom. And I was like, that sounds great. So for me, it was helpful because I was taking this theoretical of what is restorative justice, which really is about putting the victim back in the center. Like our current legal system um, really prioritizes the crown and the defendant. It's about those two people, and the victim gets lost. We get sidelined. Our voices don't get heard. Anything that we want, like we don't have any power anymore. And when we were traumatized, we lost all our power. And so we're being re-traumatized by our justice system again. So it's a very, very painful experience and process for a lot of people. So to learn about restorative justice, bringing the victim back into the center and saying like, who was harmed, what are their needs, and how do we repair this harm?
Hmm.
That's really the basics of restorative justice. And and in our system, we're pit against each other, right? The defendant's on one side, victim and crown are on the other side, um, and there's no bringing it together. So that's how we've been raised. That's how we've been formulated. And so when you talk about bringing victims and offenders together, that's quite shocking for people. And they're like, "Why would you ever want to do that?"
Hmm.
But, when you've been a victim of crime, I think it becomes easier to understand for a lot of people, not necessarily everyone, and that's why it's not necessarily for everyone either, but, um, you might have things and needs that only that person can deal with. I have a friend in England, he punched a guy just once, and the guy died, and it was not his intent to kill him, but that is what happened, and he was arrested and charged, and he pled guilty to the crime, but in that sense, the family needed answers, and they didn't get those answers because there was no trial.
Mm.
So, he was sentenced to 13 months, for involuntary manslaughter, and so he was about to come out of jail, and the family initiated a restorative justice process. And it was interesting because they told the family, like, look, he's about to get out. There's no incentive for him to do this. Don't expect it. Probably not going to happen. And Jacob said, actually, I want to do this. So they started like letter writing and they could ask their questions. Did our son come at you? Did he instigate a fight? Did he throw a drink at you? Did you have martial arts training? Like, how did you kill him with one punch? Like they had all these questions that they didn't have answers to.
Right.
And Jacob was the only one with those answers. So they started a journey and it's pretty amazing. Jacob's written a book too. It's called Right from Wrong. Jacob Dunn is his name. He's now gone on to have a play. It's gonna be on Broadway in the fall. I'm so excited to go and see it. But he's an incredible man. He talks about how when he went to jail, he was bitter and angry. Someone ratted him out and he was going to get out of jail and get back at them. He wasn't coming out in a good place. He was going to come out and cause more harm to society. He said he had no time in prison to reflect on what he had done, who he had hurt, anything, or why. This process with the victim's family, though, gave him that time he needed to reflect on that. And
Mm,
it's because of that process that he changed his life. And he's now giving back. He's now working to try to, correct paths for many different people. And he's doing amazing things. Like, he's an incredible human being. And that wouldn't have happened without this opportunity of restorative justice. And I'll say too about restorative justice is that it looks different for every situation, which is really helpful because our current legal system, I mean, it's a one size fits all. This is the crime, these are the parameters, this is sentencing, this is we go to trial. Like, it's kind of very boxed.
mm,
But people aren't boxes, and we're unique, and the situations are unique, and our needs are unique. So it's pretty amazing learning about some of the different outcomes of restorative justice, and how people need. Like, there was one lady who had her car stolen, and she, was like, "Look, she was very affluent, and so when she sat down with the young man who perpetrated the crime, and they were talking about what does she need." They said, "Well, young man, like, what can you?" Because he doesn't have any money to replace things or whatnot.
mm,
And he said, "Well, all I can do is, draw, like I'm, artsy." But, and his mother was in that sort of circle as well, and she was like, "Well, there's nothing we can do." And the lady who was harmed goes, "Hold up, hold up. Actually," she's, "I've got insurance on the car and I can pay the deductible. But what I need is I can't remember if it was her daughter or granddaughter. She's like, I need a it was like Tinkerbell painted on the wall. Can you paint Tinkerbell?" And the young man was like, "Yeah, I can paint Tinkerbell." So he came to her home and he painted this huge, beautiful mural. And that was what she needed. Our current legal system is not going to be like, "Okay, you are sentenced to painting Tinkerbell on a wall."
mhm,
So it's creative and it's unique. And that's, again, it's that idea of community. We're all together, and we have unique needs and we are interconnected. And so bringing us back together as a community, having people be accountable for their actions, take responsibility, repair the harm in whatever needs and ways that they can and are possible. Like, it's pretty amazing. The research and the data are all there. It all exists, like the recidivism rates are lower, satisfaction rates for victims are higher. It's just such a foreign concept to us to bring people together because it's not how we've been raised. But it's better, empirically through data and research, but lived experiences, which includes mine. I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
mhm. And did you know about all of these benefits of restorative justice when you were deciding to have this circle with the person who killed your family? Or is that something that you learned through the process? Like, what motivated you to get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, it took me years. Like, I did my certificate, and then I have a parole worker because the man who murdered my family is, able to apply for parole, and he has several times. So I've, read statements at parole hearings and that kind of a thing. So I have a worker that, works with me, and I talked to her and I said, "Hey, I'm doing the certificate in restorative justice." So this was back like 2021 was when that started.
Mhm,
And she said, "Well, if you're ever interested in that, you know, we can explore it." And I was like, "That's nice." But, I was kind of thinking more for other people,
mhm,
like, such a great concept. But, and then, like I said, like with my connections, working with incarcerated people here, I've had the privilege and honor of getting to know people who have committed all kinds of crimes, and that does include murder. And I've met them, and, they obviously not all of them, but there are a contingent of them that are incredibly remorseful, that would do anything to go back and change it if they could, and they can't. Like, that's the reality of where we are. So
mhm,
what do you do now? Where do we go from here? And that guy that I took the class with, he used to say, like, there are no write-off people. And so, yeah, just looking at each person and their situation. And so for me, seeing these men, because I primarily work with men, but I know there are, women that exist as well, that have sort of similar stories. But my personal experience connecting with these men that were taking responsibility, owning their things, changing lives now, doing what they can to positively benefit society and try to reduce harm as much as possible. That was so healing for me. Because I don't have that, like my offender does not take responsibility, like
Mm,
so that's always a challenge. And you'll hear too, people that talk about restorative justice, it's very funny because I'm such a unique situation. Because you'll hear some people will teach that restorative justice only works if the offender is willing to take responsibility. That's not true.
mm,
Um, like I say, in my situation, he doesn't. But then we set parameters, like when we were going to have this meeting, my worker went to him and said, okay, listen, here's the parameters. You don't get to like talk about, minimizing or these kinds of things. Like Amanda won't meet with you if you're going to do that. Like we're setting these ground rules, and he adhered to the ground rules, which I was surprised at. I actually didn't think he would. I thought at some point we were going to hit a place where he was going to, yeah, like, try to change the narrative, and he didn't. It was definitely not what I expected. It was better than what I expected, because I saw the pain in him that me sharing with him, and I didn't go there to hurt him, but I did need him to know that, and so watching him experience my pain was helpful for me. But I mean, it was a long time, it was a long journey. I had seen what could be, and so that was really what fueled, because in an ideal world, we're gonna get to a place where he is gonna take full responsibility, and he is gonna be accountable for what he did. That's ideal for me, but I didn't go in there with that hope, but I know that it's possible, and that gives me hope. So, that's really important to kinda have that, and so I almost kind of again, another way to use restorative justice is you can have surrogate victims, surrogate offenders. So you can have meetings without the actual person if it's not safe to do so, or maybe they're not here, right? What do you do if the person who harmed you, who raped you, or whatever, has died?
right.
What are you just out of luck then? Well, no. And I've met with men who have, committed sexual assault in various ways, and um yeah, and been able to connect and talk with them, and be a surrogate victim myself, and share with them, look, this was my experience. This is what I felt. This is how it impacted me, to kind of bring light and build empathy and in both parties, really.
Mhm.
So yeah, it took a long time. It was a lot. So I did kinda know what were potential outcomes. I didn't go in really expecting a lot of outcomes per se. It was really more just me going in and sharing my piece, but there were some very positive things that came out of it, and who knows, maybe we'll get to that place one day. If not, I'm okay, like, I don't need that, but it would be great, and he knows that. We talked about that too, so yeah.
Right. And has that whole process changed your views on justice, I guess, more broadly over time? Were you always sort of of the mind that you talked about how restorative justice wasn't something you thought was right for you necessarily, but maybe you thought that that was a good approach previously. But how have your views shifted over time?
Yeah, my views have shifted a lot, and also because, so part of my academics is I have 2 master's degrees in law, which has given me the opportunity to go. Last year, I was living in Cleveland, and I was in the courts. I was in, Cuyahoga County Jail, working with different clients. And the current justice system, I mean, it is that I feel like it's sort of a one size fits all, even though it tries to not be. And seeing restorative justice and then experiencing it and what it can be and the different outcomes, that's had a huge impact on me. And that is definitely why I'm a passionate advocate for changes to the justice system towards restorative justice. Um, it has such better outcomes for all parties. Again, there's parameters. We make sure that it's safe to do so. We look for re-victimization. We protect all the parties that are involved. That's all really important. It's just harder, I think, from a systemic viewpoint because box systems are easy. You know the parameters and you just do it. Whereas restorative justice, because it's unique, you have to look at each situation. You have to check what the supports are. What do we need to do here? It's not impossible at all. It's being done in a lot of ways and in various capacities around the world. It's being used in educational processes as well, which has been amazing. And I love, and again, here comes that hope piece again, looking at young people that are being raised in an educational system that uses restorative justice to work through. Because I did not experience that. It was so foreign to me. It was the weirdest thing to start learning about it. To sit down and talk things through the way that we do and that kind of thing. But it's so much better, you know? And so once my brain kind of got out of the like, but this is how we do it, but this is how it works. Okay, but wait a second, is it really working? Do prisons and policing really work? Are we really that much safer? I mean, like in America, right? Largest incarcerated population on the planet per capita. If prisons worked, it would be the safest country on the planet.
Hmm.
It's not, unfortunately. So, I mean, we know these systems are not working. And I mean, God bless our police officers. However, they get eaten up by the system and the trauma that they experience. I don't know any statistics for police officers. I don't even know if they carry them because they're probably really bad. But I know there was a study done in the US and corrections officers, their life expectancy drops significantly just from being a corrections officer, you
Mm.
know, because the way our prisons are. So like our system, it's it's not working, it's not healing, and I want healthy, healing communities. The part of the problem too is, and here I'm gonna slag on politicians because it's easy to sell to say, "We're gonna build more prisons. We're gonna hire more police, and that's gonna keep us safer." Unfortunately, they're wrong because it isn't what makes us safer. Us being in community. So funding community programs, I mean, whether it's even things simple as like food banks or housing, because crime is fueled by poverty. There is a significant contributor to that. Mental health pieces. We have terrible mental health supports. And in North America, we have to do a better job helping people with mental health. Like, we just have to if we wanna be safer. So funding those types of programs and organizations, that is what is gonna keep us safer. Police are reactive and responsive. They come after the fact. They don't know ahead of time, right? So I'm thankful for the job that they do. I'm sorry for the job they do. I also think they need better support and training as well. They're getting called to mental health calls that they've only been trained to respond to in violence. So
Right.
we're getting the outcomes we've trained them for.
Hmm.
So I don't think reform is necessary. I think a whole freaking overhaul is necessary. But I'm also aware that can be a challenge. Norway did it. There are countries that it was interesting, and I'm positive that it was Norway. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but they looked at their skyrocketing crime rate. They were a very unsafe country. Things were not going well, and the government went, "Okay, this is ridiculous. We have to do something." And so they did something. They did something drastic, and they literally flipped the whole system on its head. And they created, prisons that are humane, that treat people like people because we expect you to act like people. So we're going to treat you like that. And yes, there are a small percentage. So I'm not. My business partner, we disagree on this because he calls me an abolitionist, and I say I'm not an abolitionist. But because there are a small contingent of people that are unsafe to be in the community, but we're not treating them poorly. And I feel that's important because how we treat them is a reflection of us, and I want to be better. I look at the man who's incarcerated who murdered my family and I say, I don't want to be like you.
Hmm.
And so, I know that like he's been beaten and we talked about some of the things that have happened to him. And I said, like, I don't wish those things to happen to you because I want to be better. Like, that's dehumanizing you. You dehumanized me, my sister, the kids. That's how you came to a place where you were able to take their life. I don't want to be like that, which means I have to humanize you as well. It doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean I think you're safe to be in the community because I don't. I go to the pro boards and I say, he's not safe. He's not taking responsibility. He's still, selfish. He's still, what's about me, what I need, what I want. And until we deal with that, he's not going to be safe to the community. He'll harm someone else. So, and that's what I say, like, I'm not an abolitionist, but I think that if we addressed a lot of these other areas, mental health, poverty, those kinds of things. I mean, the crime rate we could cut way down and
Mhm.
and also make it more socially unacceptable to commit crimes and build community in places. Why do gangs exist? Because you got somewhere to belong.
Right.
Somewhere to belong, right? Talked to, gang members, former gang members. They needed community. They won't articulate it exactly that way, but, their homes were broken down. They didn't have a safe place, and the gangs gave them a safe place for them, right? They gave them all kinds of things that they weren't getting in their families and their community. So, we need to do a better job because we belong to each other.
Right. And I think you were right about that being Norway as well, because Norway has come up on this podcast before in terms of a criminal justice system that works more effectively in that you're not sentenced to a life in prison and you never have the chance to get out. And when you transition from prison into like more of a community environment where you get to go out for part of the day and work in community, and it helps to like reintegrate people, and there's a lower recidivism rate and that sort of thing. So I think that that's something that is shared by a lot of the guests that we've had on this podcast, that there needs to be some sort of big change in the justice system that we have here, because it's not working as well as it does in other places, and it's leaving people without community and without those types of supports. And speaking of supports, what role you talked about this in terms of like I don't know if you would call it role playing, but working with either people who are victims or people who are aggressors or perpetrators around that restorative justice piece, and sort of having them fill in for the people who were actually affected, I guess, in a way to facilitate that restorative justice component when one of those parties doesn't exist or can't participate. And I'm curious to know how you keep people safe in that process. So what kind of supports are needed to be in place in order for, say, a victim of a crime who wants to participate in that system to feel like they can do that in a safe way?
Right. So I will say, if you have been a victim of a crime and you're interested in that, there's going to be an advocacy piece because this just isn't as well known. And also too, I know in Ontario, Marley Lease is a head of a group called Survivors for Justice Reform. She's a sexual assault survivor who advocated for restorative justice in her case. I mean, if we want to talk about sexual assault and how the system fails, like, oh my gosh, that's a whole podcast in and of itself, right? However, Crown policy in Manitoba and Ontario, in Ontario, it's specifically Section D4, and you can Google it. They specifically say that Crown will not allow restorative justice in cases of sexual harm.
Mm,
Uh, and it's like, okay, well, I could see that if you guys were doing a better job, but you're not, like what you're offering us isn't better. And we're also looking at research that's coming out with domestic violence. And I mean, my sister really one of those, like she was about to leave. And the highest, danger zone basically for women is when they're about to leave.
mm,
And calling the police, the rates of violence actually escalate. So so what do you do? And so again, I'm going to advocate again funding for women's centers, safety shelters, things like that, but also dealing with community. I know of a restorative justice case where a woman victim of domestic violence was able to bring in community supports and was able to engage with the partner's friends and family to sort of hold him accountable and allow her to leave, when she was afraid or threatened, she had people that she would call and there was a system. So there would always be sort of like someone on call for her. So if she was afraid, that person would come. They didn't call the police. Someone else would come, someone who knew him that, had he showed up at the door, if he was there when they got there, they could be like, "Okay, Bob, what are you doing?" You know what I mean? Like, "Let's talk about this. What's happening?" And he knew about the process and he was a part of it. And so it was really de-escalating. When you're bringing in police into these situations, it's escalating. There's also certain jurisdictions that have a policy where they have to take someone. And so often you'll see, and the statistic in terms of Black families, where both partners end up being taken in are significantly higher. I had a client who, had a disagreement with his wife, and she was violent with him. And the neighbors called the police, and the police came, and he said, "You're taking me? Like, you're not taking her." "Did I hit her?" "No, but you're not taking her." And so I met him because he's in jail, and he's like, "I didn't hit her, like, I didn't do anything." And he had the marks. He had to document his injuries, but they have to take someone. And so I think that, there's better ways, there's better alternatives, with better outcomes. Yeah, so people who are victims of crime, they need to advocate that this is something that they want. There are services out there. I know specifically in the Lower Mainland, Community Justice Initiatives, CJI, they're an amazing organization. My restorative justice worker is out of that organization, but the whole team is incredible. And they've actually started something new. It's called collaborative sentencing. There's no cost to victims, and victims can advocate for this. And so there is a criteria, especially for that specific program. In that case, the offenders do need to be willing to plead guilty, but they're brought together to talk about a sentencing plan. And again, it's still that restorative process of like, who was harmed, what are their needs, where do we go from here? And so far, in all of the test cases that they've done, the judges have all sentenced exactly according to the sentencing plan. 'Cause it made sense.
Mhm.
A lot of times the sentences were not as high as Crown wanted, they're not as low as the defendants wanted. It's also been a mixture too. There's been some amazing, amazing stories come out of that. But yeah, so as a victim, like, you need to advocate for yourself, but you are the victim. So you do have rights. We have a Victims' Bill of Rights in Canada that entitles you to certain things, and you can push for this. Now, if it is deemed that the offender is not safe, right? Because again, we don't want a person re-traumatized. But that's where there's a lot of prep work that goes into these things. It's not just like, oh, you want to do this? You want to do this? Great. We're just going to throw you together. No, right? There's a criteria, and there are checklists, and there are interviews that everybody has to go through to make sure that this is safe. And I mean, people can pull the plug at any time, kind of a thing. Like, we were given the option when we were in the circle, like, if anybody needs a break, if anybody's done, any of that kind of stuff, like, and I think that's relieving to me to know that, okay, it's not like you're going to be locked in this room with this person for hours on end with no opportunity to leave, and you're stuck here. No, like, you go and, like, check it out, and how does it go? You know what I mean? Like, you can
Mhm.
walk away at any time. So that's always really helpful, or even just take a break, right? So we ended up having 2 sessions because they have to do a count at the prison, and he's in prison, so I had to go into the prison to meet him. And so we did like an hour and a half in the morning, and then he went for count, and then came back, and we did 2.5 in the afternoon. And so it was a lot of time, but it was very useful time. The time went by very quickly. But yeah, it is definitely something that you have to advocate for. Make sure. And again, we talked about like trained therapists, same thing, like with restorative justice, trained professionals that know what they're doing, have experience, to protect yourself, to protect everybody involved, and make sure that the outcomes are reasonable, and that that's what you're all sort of working towards. So,
Mhm. And as it relates to that desire to be an advocate, was there a moment when you realized that your story could help others?
yeah, I think it was after I met with him that I realized, this isn't just for me and just about me.
Mhm.
I've always been a more outspoken person, which has oftentimes been a struggle, because then you feel like you don't fit. You're the black sheep because you're the one questioning or challenging. And it's like, why can't you just be nice and quiet, and sit and smile or something? But like, that's just never been who I am. And so as I went through this experience, I was like, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be talking about this because you can put down data and research in front of people, and maybe it'll mean something, but not really. But like when I give workshops and I talk, and I put, on the slideshow, here's me and my sister and the kids on the trampoline the week before she died. Like that, people remember that. And you can argue with data and statistics if you want to. I mean, depending, you can't argue with me. You can't tell me my experience wasn't valid. You can't tell me it didn't help me. Like, you can't tell me that. So
Mhm.
I'm telling you that this helped me. And we're past, I mean, we're coming up 31 years, 32 years this year. I literally try to not specifically always remember.
Mm.
But I mean, it's over 30 years now since this happened, and we just did our restorative process a couple of years ago. So there's people like that collaborative sentencing where it's at the front end of the whole entire process, and then there's people like me that are on the long after sentencing end. So there's a wide variety and spectrum. There's not really a too late, that's the nice thing too, right? Depending on where you are. Cause again, like I carried this for, 30 some years and had things to say, so
Mhm.
I'm grateful that I got that opportunity. However, and I know that this is very serious, but restorative justice has been used at the beginning. It's been used in sentencing even for cases of murder. And it's been very, very helpful. So how much less could I have had to carry for 30 years if we had something like this back then,
Right.
Uh, I don't know that it would have been able to be applied in my case at the front end because of him, not taking responsibility, all that kind of stuff. But for people that do and that can, like look at Jacob's case, right? That is an ideal case that at the beginning, at the outset, had they been able to work that through, his family, like the victim's family wouldn't have had to carry that for as long as they did. So yeah, I think more people need to know about it. I think and so that's part again why I'm advocating, doing education, giving workshops, speaking anywhere and everywhere that I can to share my story because people need to have a better understanding of what restorative justice is and isn't, and that it's possible and these are the outcomes. Because a
Mhm.
lot of people think that it's soft on crime, because it's not just this like, death penalty, life sentence. But I've talked to incarcerated men who have said, I'll sit in this jail cell before I'll sit in front of my victim because I can't. Like, that's harder. And
Right.
jail's hell, like,
Mhm.
I've been in there. Like, it's horrible, like, how we treat people, I can't, like, you know, s some are different than others, but I've been in one that I just, like, I completely broke down because I had to walk through the solitary confinement, like, cages that
Oh,
they put
wow.
people in, and I couldn't handle it, like, I was like, "Oh my god, we do this to people?" And
Mm.
I was like, "I'm a victim, don't do this in my name. Do not do this in my name. This isn't for me. This is
Mhm.
like, abhorrent. This is torture, and I'm not interested in that, you know? So, like I said, because that's not who I wanna be. I want to see people.
Right. Um, and you have a book coming out in mid-August. We've talked about this a little bit already. What inspired you to write that?
I think there were 2 things. The first is it was therapeutic for me. Again, it was part of that journey for me. There were things in the writing process that I saw that I hadn't seen before, and even things that I went through with my editor where she was like, "Okay, but do you see this here? Like, when these things happen, like, that was abusive in your family." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't see that before. That was just life." Like,
Right.
so I think it was the first reason was for me was to write it out to and because there's a validation to that, like, these things really did happen to me. Because it's sometimes easy to just forget about it, minimize it, and be like, "Nah, no big deal." Like, whatever, it was just life, it happened, and talk about it like it's no big deal.
Mm.
It was a big deal. No one should have ever experienced what I went through. That should not have happened, but it did. And so the second piece to that, though, is like I said earlier, was um, knowing that I learned from other people and I healed from connecting with other people. And so I was like, if there is any way that my pain can bring healing to anyone else and make them feel not alone or give them hope to know, like, I don't know if I can, you go through shit and like you can still come out the other side. And I really love my life right now. It's so not perfect, but it's not what it was. I love who I am now as a person and I didn't before, because I really internalized everything that happened to me and didn't see the value in myself whatsoever. And that's not where I am anymore. And it doesn't mean that I don't have struggles anymore. And that's a hard balance that I try and I don't know, I mean, hopefully I capture it well in my book. The balance between I'm doing well, but it's not all perfect. I don't have everything all together. I don't have everything figured out, but I'm still really loving, where I am and who I am right now. And And it makes a lot of difference, and I'm proud of the work that I've done to get to this place, because it's been a lot of work. And I know there's a lot of people that still struggle because they've had similar experiences, like I think that I'm super blessed and maybe even a part bit lucky and part hard work to be where I am,
Mm,
and that fuels me when I see people that are on the streets or in prison or anywhere else, because I'm like, easily could have been me.
right.
Easily.
And did you write that book then for other survivors? Do you have a title or a release date that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so it's called Becoming the Brave One. And so it's a journey about, what does bravery look like, because bravery isn't just about like having it all together, showing up and doing things. It's about like in the midst of fear and insecurity and chaos, like going out and doing stuff anyways.
Mm,
Because that's really kind of how I felt, like I said, like I've been the outspoken one, I've been the challenging one, but it didn't mean that I had confidence in myself, because I didn't. But that's what bravery is in those moments, even when you don't feel like it or you don't believe it, you're gonna do it anyways, you
mhm,
know? That's what being brave is. We picture bravery with heroes and super, like capes and whatever, right? Like, it's not, it's actually more simple than that, It's all of us in our everyday lives showing up in ways that we don't think we're capable, that we don't know how, but we're doing it anyways.
mhm,
So I wrote it for myself, for my journey, and I've written it for others to hopefully give them, hope and a sense of encouragement, and, that keep going, like just don't give up. That's the biggest thing. Like, don't give up. There definitely were so many times that I wanted to give up, that I thought about giving up, that it was like whatever giving up looked like, whether it was like, quitting something or quitting life, there's definitely been moments where I was like, like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, just take me out.
mhm,
Um, so that has definitely happened. And so I wanted to tell people, like, just, I didn't quit. Sucked. And I mean, sometimes I was on the floor with cheesies or, screaming or whatever it was that it looked like in that moment, you know? Yeah. And then, like I say, like having that community and being authentic and honest with people about where I was at, to be like, look, you guys, like, I'm not okay today. And I don't feel like I can do this. Like, I feel like this is too much. I'm overwhelmed. I can't, and having them just listen and encourage, and, or my friend Matt would be like, "Oh, you're really in your head, Amanda." And it's just, but he says it in such a like loving and compassionate way that you can sense, like, it's not this judgmental, like, "Ugh, you're really in your," like, it's just like, oh man, that empathy, which just
mhm,
oozes out of that man to me, to be like, "Oh my goodness, like, that's really wrapped up in you," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah." You know? So yeah, so hopefully it is, helpful to other people. I also want it to be helpful to people who maybe haven't experienced quite that amount of trauma or things. We look at people and go, this is how a rape victim should act, look, talk, think. This is how someone should do these things. And so I'm sharing my journey, and part of it is talking about that. Listen, everybody's different. There's fight, flight, freeze, there's, like all these different things, and we all respond differently. So, keep that in mind. You think, "Oh, this is how I would react if I was in that situation." And that's great. And maybe you would. Maybe you wouldn't. You don't actually know unless you're in that situation. But, the judgments that we lay on others, like, "Oh, you're grieving, you should be crying."
mhm,
As who, right? Or you're not, or you know what I mean? Like, we look at others, and so I'm like, "Look, my journey looks different." The more you learn about people's journeys and the differences, the more you can see, like, hey, we all have our own journeys. And so, yeah, just the empathy for other people and their experiences and what they've gone through, and maybe too, like, why they've made those decisions. Like, I'm working really hard that, when someone's doing something, even if it's against me and I'm like, "Oh, okay, where are they coming from?" And again, it's that balance. We still hold people accountable. It's not like we just let everything slide. Like, no, no, we're gonna talk about it. But when you've done something that harmed me, I'm gonna try to pause for a second. And again, I'm working on this, right? And be like, "Hey, where's that coming from? Why is that?" And I've been able to like work through some really great conflicts with some of my closest people, like, who said things and did things that were like really hurtful. And I would have, you could have just like written off and be like, nope. And I even had like I have this amazing woman who's adopted me. Like, she's like a surrogate mom for me. And it was funny because I read her the text message one time from this person. She goes, I would never speak to them again. And I was like, and I loved that from her. Like, I needed that from her. I needed that protective, like, what? I needed that in that moment. But because that gave me the space to go back and go, oh, yeah, what they said wasn't okay. But then I thought about it and went, oh, but I think this is why they said it. And so later on, I was able to go to them and say, listen, what you said really hurt. I think this is where you're coming from. I think you were afraid that I was going to reject you. I think this is what you were working on. Like, is there any validity to that? And we were able to, like, work it through, and we're still, like, great friends now,
Mhm.
So just taking that pause of why is this person doing what they're doing, keep holding people accountable. I didn't just assume, first of all, I didn't just assume that that's why they said what they said, I did clarify with them and talk to them about it, but then I also said, like, that was really hurtful. You know what I mean? Like, so that accountability and responsibility piece, and then doing that for ourselves too and being like, "Oh, in this in this piece, like, what am I responsible for?
Mm.
What's mine to own in this?" Because and I love this. My guys from the prison in California, they taught me this. I've learned so much, from them. But they said, like, even if of the whole thing, your part is only 10%, you own 100% of that 10%. And I was like, "Oh, there's that." Because we look at it, we go, "Psst, I'm only 10%. The rest of this is on you." No, no, but you still have that 10%. So take your 10%. Hold them accountable for their 90, but take your 10. You're trying to discount your 10 because they got 90. It's not about comparison though. It's about what is yours to own. And so working that through in relationships with everybody and still having healthy boundaries. There are people, if they're not gonna own things, if they're not gonna, treat you with respect or talk to you with respect or work through conflict in a healthy way, then there may be people in relationships that you can't work that through, and it's
Mhm.
not safe, and you keep those boundaries. So, it's always a balance. It's always, there's just not the box answers. Life's just not like that.
Right. And you mentioned a little earlier that you were wanting this book to give people hope. So, despite everything that you've been through, where does that hope within you come from?
I think it comes from seeing the people that are in my community, seeing them learn and grow, seeing that change is possible, seeing it in myself. I think that's where it comes from in me. Even though there's places I would like it to be, like I say, like I would love for my offender to, own his stuff and change and be a different person, but he's not. But still seeing it in the world, even if it's in different contexts, like, that is definitely what gives me hope, and watching our next generations, watching my kids, like, my kids are so my gosh, I love them so freaking much. They're the most amazing people in the whole world. But, like, as I was learning about restorative justice, like, I would be like, "All right, you guys, we're gonna circle." They'd be like, okay, who did what now or what's going on, and they really, I mean, they kind of grumbled and complained a little bit, but I didn't care. I was like, "Nope, we're circling up." And we would sit in a circle and we would have a talking piece sometimes and sometimes not. And sometimes we would have a talking circle just about to share where we're at. How are you guys? I just want to check in. How are you guys all doing? There's been a lot going on. Or I've been super busy. I haven't been able to connect with you guys as much as I would like. I want to just do a checkup. Or there's been a conflict between 2 or more. I have 4 kids, so, it could be between all of them. It might have been a situation where I'm like, "We're all gonna sit down together and we're all gonna talk about what happened." Or it might have just been 2 of them, and I'm like, "Okay, you 2 need to sit down and talk about, like, what's happened, how everybody's feeling," and doing circles in families. So, restorative justice isn't just about you're a victim of crime justice system, but it's literally about how we're in community with each other, right? Because
Mhm.
we harm each other all the time, right? I say something that hurts your feelings or I do something that, was offensive, right? And so, like, being able to sit down and talk about it and address the conflict and own it and, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it really applies to all the different areas of our life. And so, God bless my kids because they were sort of like my first guinea pigs. They were the first ones that I was like, let's look at what this looks like, And then it branched out from there and then watching it in other areas and people. And so seeing these younger generations that are being raised in these types of practices, and I get so angry at older generations because it's typically older generations, mine and up. They're like, ugh, snowflakes, and they're, or like, I get it. It's different. But I think about like how it would have been nice to have a place that was safe for me to feel as a kid, I didn't get that. So, I've grown up with a lot more walls and boundaries, and well, yeah, more walls. Boundaries are like a healthy word, but more like walls in my heart and not allowing myself to feel or express things or deal with things the way that I should and need to, and be able to emotionally connect even with people the way that we really should in a healthy way because that wasn't safe for me.
Hmm.
And so, honestly, I feel like that maybe comes from a deep-seated jealousy that they would never admit to, these older generations that say, snowflakes, like, because you were not afforded that ability in your generation and when you were growing up to be a snowflake, to have feelings, to express your voice, to say that. Um, but I'm so excited that's where we're going because we need to. I think that's way healthier, versus what has been in the past. So that gives me hope too, to see the changes that are coming. So I'm very hopeful about like our future. There's so much work to do, but I need that hope too, because sometimes I can really get into the muck and grime of it, and get lost in the weeds. So I need that. I need those younger generations and watching them, TikTok movements and things that I'm like, what? And, they do amazing things for good causes, and so I love them being champions of human rights and each other and community. So that pushes me forward for sure, unless I'm like, "Look, any way I can support or help that, I'm in."
Hmm. Yeah, and we've talked about a lot so far in this episode, and I really appreciate how open you've been and the the really in-depth conversation. I know that this is probably a challenging one for you as well as for people who are listening to hear about all of these things that may or may not trigger something that's happened within their own lives. And I think that could be the case with any episode that we've done, but particularly with this one, we've dealt with a lot of that sort of subject matter. But I'm wondering, is there anything that we haven't discussed today that you think would still be really important to bring up before we start to wrap things up?
I don't think so. I think one of the things too I'll say that like in my book at the end there's a resources section. And so it lists some different, really good books, but it also lists some different like restorative justice organizations and opportunities so that people can connect. Whether it's something you want to learn more about, there's so many great websites and things out there, videos and stuff, even just, go on YouTube. There's a lot of great information to learn more about restorative justice. And then again, if you want to get involved in terms of being an advocate or, a facilitator, or you've been a victim and you're looking for resources for you. And again, like whether it's you've been a victim 30 years ago or you've been a victim last week or yesterday, like there's a lot of get resources and support for people that want to get out there. So that's in there. You can reach out to me. So I have a website. It's amandacarrasco.com, which is AMANDACARRASCO.com. See, I've got to spell the last name. But yeah, and you can, pre-sales are out there. So pre-sales will be available on the website. So you can pre-order the books to have it shipped as soon as it's ready. Or you can, like I say, like order through the website. Also, I want to mention too, you're right. There's one other thing I should mention. So 50% of the proceeds of my book are actually going to an incredible organization called Love Does, and specifically their branch in Mexico. Love Does was founded by a friend of mine. His name is Bob Goff. He's an incredible man, retired lawyer, who's done a lot of great work. He's written 4 books as well. They're super great. Love Does was his first one, and it was huge in terms of impact on my life, my kids' life. We used to sit down every night and we'd read a chapter, and they're like, Bob, like it's so funny. He's just such a great person. And it's a really light read. It's not a heavy read. And then he wrote Everybody Always, and then he's written, a few more since then. So check out Bob's work. He's really great. But so he's now started this organization called Love Does. They do incredible things all over the world. And Mexico's near and dear to my heart because I have family there. But I also have such a global perspective. I get to travel a lot. And so I've been all over the world, and I'm so blessed by that. And so, when we were looking at, because I knew I wanted to do something with the proceeds of the book. And when I was trying to figure out what to do, I mean, I first reached out to Bob, But their Mexico place is actually a facility for asylum seekers. And so it's not just about people in Mexico. It's actually about people from like all over the world that are looking for asylum, and they're getting support there. So I loved that there was a Mexico component. There's a global component. So check out Love Does Mexico. And if you buy the book, 50% of the proceeds are going there, because I think that was really important. Again, that this isn't just about me. It's about, what we can do to help other people as well. And yeah, any way to support that organization, like this is what we need to do. Like we need to get involved in community. We need to stop sitting back and being like, let someone else solve the crimes or deal with the problems. No, we need to get involved. Whether it's, handing out sandwiches, to people that are experiencing homelessness, or whatever it is, donating your dollars, right? Like find something that really is resonating with you and get connected with that. But giving back to our communities instead of just kind of sitting and trying to let everybody else be with it and be like, well, the world's going to crap, like, yeah, because you're not involved. Get involved. Go do something, like, and you'll find too, like, how much that helps you to be connected with others. Like, don't be selfish and be like, I'm going to help out because I'm such a great person, or no, but like, when you see people being uplifted, like it uplifts you, like when it's more than just about you. Our pain is, it can be transformative when we find meaning in our pain.
Hmm.
So that's the thing, to find, meaning coming from what I've experienced helping others. When you go out there and you're helping others, you're going to find some meaning in that as well. So whatever that looks like for you and your community, your world, go get connected.
Right. And maybe that's the answer to this next question, but I like to wrap up every podcast with the question, what can our audience do to help? So is that what you would say? Go get connected, or is there some other advice that you would have for folks?
No, I would. I mean, I think that twofold, right? Like make sure that you're working on your own journey and working on yourself. If you need therapy, that's great. Do that. If you need to find those core people, find those core people. If you don't have them, keep looking, right? Keep trying, keep trying. They're out there. All you need is one, two's great. But at
Hmm.
least one. If you can find more, that's awesome. But build your core team, and then from there, do that branching out. But yeah, get involved. Whatever you have, people could use. Whether it's your time, whether it's your resources, whether it's your painting skills, whether it's we just think like, "Ah, man, but I don't have anything." Yes, you do. You actually have a lot of resources. You're just not aware. So, look around. There's a lot of great organizations all around the world. So, I know there's an opportunity and a spot. And if we all just kind of did that, if we all, took self-care and worked on ourselves, but then also worked in our community, the world's going to change. It really will. I believe it. So yeah, get involved.
Wonderful. Yeah, what a great message to send us off on. And thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today to share your story. This has been a social justice podcast. I'm your host, Nicola Spurling, and today I've been joined by Amanda Carrasco for a conversation about restorative justice.
Thank you.
Thank you. You've been listening to a social justice podcast, an exploration of our world's social issues, brought to you by NES Design and Construction and hosted by Nicola Spurling on the traditional and unceded territories of the Kwikwetlem, Katzie, and Qayqayt peoples.